How's it going, everybody? This is Marcel Martin of Mavs Digest. In today's video, I got the one and only, the legendary Grant Afseth on cam. How's it going, Grant? How you doing?
I'm doing really well. Looking forward to having a playoff series to cover. Definitely wasn't the case last season, but we have it this season, so it's definitely something I'm looking forward to.
Yes, sir. It feels like Christmas in July, and it's not even July. After that tumultuous end of our season last year, it feels good to have a team that we have 50 wins again. This is the second time under Coach Kidd where we do have 50 wins. We actually have an actual team. I was talking to some people the other day how in the past, or at least in the entire era of Luka Doncic, he was miles ahead of our second best player. And I feel like that was kind of the reason why we never really saw a lot of success. But now with Luka and Kyrie, there's not that big of a difference between those two. I mean, Kyrie is a champion and former All Star, multi All Star. He is proven to be one of the best point guards in the league, if not the best point guards. And playing along Luka Doncic, man, it's been nothing but magic all season. But before we get into all of that, Grant, tell the people about yourself. If you don't know, now you know, Grant. Let them know about you.
Yeah, I write about the Mavericks on Sports Illustrated's Mavericks site. I write about every game, all the news updates, feature stories, interviews, pretty much everything that involves covering the team. And then on YouTube, I do some video breakdowns, looking at some film. Throughout the season, and then also I post some just random stuff like press conferences that I'm at, and then just different things as well. Like if I see something interesting and my camera's actually working and running, and then I post some stuff like that as well too. But yeah, you can find me on all of those platforms, YouTube, Grant Afseth. Same with social media as well. Post a lot of just a lot of just general stuff about the Mavs throughout the course of the season.
That's what's up. That's what everybody. Make sure you look up Grant Afseth. He's definitely been one of the biggest sources of information for me on this channel. The channel's only been around for like 3 months now, but Grant Afseth is the guy I go to after every game, after any rumor or report. I'm like, what does Grant have to say? They may say one thing, but what does Grant know? Because I see you're at like every game's press conference. You were actually with the team today, I believe, while they're practicing. So what was that like? Like
Yeah,
anything
they
that you saw?
practice. Yeah, they practice at USC. We don't get to see like a lot of that practice, but I thought it was interesting seeing some of the stuff, like just the general vibe of the team. They were very like upbeat, positive. They seem very like relaxed heading into a playoff game. That's not really something a lot. Every team is going to be like. You almost would drop in November or February and today, and it all kind of feels similar. So being loose before a big game, probably a beneficial thing. And then just some little small interesting things like Derrick Lively and Daniel Gafford working together, uh, on face ups, and Kyrie and Luka shooting on the same side. A lot of positive, stuff. With those guys as well too, and the previous practice, they were actually shooting together,
Yeah.
doing a shooting game as well too, and a great chemistry between those guys. So usually stuff like that, like not a lot of substantive things where you're like,
Yeah.
oh, that scheme approach. I'm gonna watch for that. But just like the general vibe and like things that they're working on after that general practice is always interesting to see.
That's good. That's good. Before the playoffs, I mean, making sure the vibes are right is very important because the playoffs, it's a completely different thing, right? It's a best of seven. It's a bigger stage. The lights are brighter. You may be talent wise ready, but if you're not clicking as a unit, if you're not as a cohesive team ready to go, that could be what makes or breaks some teams come playoff time. We saw earlier today the Suns lost to the Timberwolves by like 20 points. If the Timberwolves are going to beat the Suns, go right ahead. But in almost a 20-point blowout in game one, that's how a team who is locked in sets the tone up against a team who was kind of quickly assembled in the offseason. Didn't have a whole lot of time to gel. But as far as the Mavericks go, in that same regard, we saw changes at, last season's trade deadline, the offseason, even this trade deadline, where the roster seems to keep changing. But what do you think is the reason why this team is clicking so well, even with the many roster changes?
Yeah, I definitely think it's having enough time to really sort through things. First and foremost begins with that Luca and Kyrie duo.
Mhm.
They had time to kind of work through that initial period, see what works, see what doesn't work. Last season, in the I believe 16 games that they played together, and they went 5-11 when they were both on the court. And one of the issues, at that time is things you kind of can't control injuries. Like when one was healthy, the other one seemed to be injured, and then it would kind of rotate a little bit at times. And, that wasn't the case, this season after the All Star break. Kyrie played 31 consecutive games, the most in his, career since 2016. So that's, definitely a big difference in of itself, but a huge difference for the organization and them as well is that, they were able to go into the offseason, have time to think about all of that stuff. And then they still had time early in the season after training camp, that long trip to, Abu Dhabi and Madrid, 12 days as a unit. They were able to test what they still needed as a group. They got to see that Grant Williams, not the ideal fit that they may have thought at the 4 spot, sliding over to the small ball 5. So, all right, we still need that perimeter, size. Go get PJ Washington and then get another center, Daniel Gafford, after seeing that Derrick Lively, truly is the player that, they were confident in getting in the draft and that they saw in Summer League. So now you kind of patchwork, fill the holes that you had around Luka and Kyrie as a, organization. And that general premise of having two superstars that cohesively fit together, that can attack with the ball, play without the ball, works very well. But also, when you have enough defensive impact around them, that is where things get interesting. And they've been able to do that by doing that, roster patchwork during the season. That sets them up nicely as well long term, since those guys fit Luca's timeline as well too.
Yeah, and I think that's the big important piece of it because I remember during the trade deadline when we traded for Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington, the picks that were attached with those trades, it kind of got a lot of fans worried. We're like, man, why are we getting rid of the 2027 first round pick? And yeah, it may be like 2, 3 years from now, but like first round picks are worth their weight in gold, it seems. But I was on the side of, well, with Luka's timeline, with his window, I mean, what, Luka's like 25? So is PJ Washington, so is Daniel Gafford. They fit that. Instead of trying to draft a rookie who you don't know how long they'll take to actually develop and help the team win, we can find players that are ready now. So at the trade deadline, yeah, I think those picks were definitely worth the players that we got back in PJ Washington, whose defense has been phenomenal. And Daniel Gafford has been a godsend. I mean, I've always thought that he was a great player. I thought over there in Washington really wasn't being utilized to his fullest. But I think for me at least, he has surpassed my expectations as being just the big man that we need. On this channel, I've talked about how we've been through Willie Cauley Stein, we've been through JaVale McGee, Christian Wood, Moses Brown, Dwight Powell for the longest time. Like we've been through a lot of centers. I mean, Boban Marjanovic as well, who I'm a big fan of Boban, but for this Dallas Mavericks team, for Luka Doncic and the schemes that we want to work on, the things that we want to help us win games, Daniel Gafford has been the answer, just like how Derrick Lively was the answer. But for you, what do you see, at least between those two and Derrick Lively and Daniel Gafford, that adds to our levels of success so far?
Yeah, I actually think the similarities between the two is such a big element of it all, where they're both, really active offensive rebounders. They're both
Mhm.
shot blockers. They're both, high athleticism, vertical lob threats, where you don't really have that drop off in any of those areas. And having two of them and not having someone that checked all those boxes at all on previous versions of this roster
Yeah.
is definitely a interesting dynamic. And you just kind of have the payoff of taking that chance of being like the idea of what we could accomplish by filling these holes with the right players. You're basically seeing the maximum return where Luca went from having a very, shooting heavy team where he's creating all these corner threes and all this, clean looks on the perimeter. He still does, but he's basically turned it up from creating the most corner threes to now being the most effective at creating those lobs, interior play finishing sequences. Basically, whatever team you give Luca, he's going to get the most out of it, is essentially what we're seeing. And having that identity that travels, I guess you could say, where you have that defensive impact on a nightly basis. That's not impacted by if you have a cold stretch shooting from three. So that type of identity is more, I guess you could say, of a sustainable sort of setup or configuration around Luca, where he's going to create those looks regardless. And doesn't hurt that you are able to expand upon what Gafford has shown in previous situations, but has the talent around him to be able to fully maximize, like his passing. I think he's been an underrated passer,
Yeah.
dribble handoffs with Kyrie Irving, where Kyrie's getting top blocked and he's back cutting. Receiving those passes from Gafford's been something that almost happens like once at least every game. So, things like that even Derrick Lively's shown ability to do that and has been impressive and wasn't necessarily something people were expecting from him as well too. So they're very similar, and having no drop off, as they like to say, everyone involved, like whether it's Gafford, whether it's Lively, Jason Kidd, or anyone with the team, they love having that depth where you can count on someone to step in when there's foul trouble and bring the same level of impact.
For sure, for sure. And one thing that I was kind of just reminiscing on earlier in the week was when Derek Lively was out for those 2 weeks with that knee injury, and we relied heavily on Daniel Gafford. And sometimes we got to throw Maxi at the five. Sometimes we got to go PJ Washington at the five. Maybe even Dwight Powell at the five. It makes me so appreciative that we have Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively, because if we didn't trade for Daniel Gafford and Lively got hurt, I don't know how many of those games we could close out. I don't know how many of those games we could actually win. I mean, that center position has been something that we've been trying to fix year over year. But this year, that's not a problem. That's not something that we got to even worry about. But one thing that you did mention is just the identity of this team. How we used to always create open looks. Like we would create wide open threes for everybody every single game. It was just, hey, can you knock them down? But after the trade deadline, we started to become a lob threat. We were beating out teams, but points in the paint by 10 points almost every game. How far do you think that will translate as identity of this team? Do you think that maybe we'll fall back into just a jump shooting team, or is that who this Dallas Mavericks team will be moving forward?
I think honestly, it equips them very well to face whatever defensive scheme they're looking at. Whether it's the switching, you got two elite isolation players to rip that apart, as we saw in those two games, especially against the Houston Rockets, where Ime Udoka lived with that and made the superstars work, and they worked.
Yeah.
They
Oh yeah.
scored lots of ISO buckets on them.
Yeah.
So you can face that and feel very confident in their abilities to get the job done, or if they're just going to let them play in traditional pick and roll actions. Luka is going to rip your defense apart doing that as well too. And if you're going to blitz them and play 4-on-3 basketball, then that's something that Luka actually prefers, because from a unselfish team standpoint, having numbers going downhill in the middle of the floor, that's a tough thing for a defense to account for. So I think just the individual attention that Luka continues to command as the most blitzed offensive player in the league is going to sort things out naturally, where teams are going to, kind of like, as we've seen, they've kind of gone away from some of those typical things that you would do against other players, maybe of lesser degrees, where they're like, okay, well, we don't really need a help off the dunker spot, against this guy, but we have to regardless against Luka. And now they have the lob threats to fully capitalize, the paint finishers, whether it's a lob or not. And overall, it's just like there's some things that they're just going to have to live with. And now they have those interior talents to basically fully maximize making them pay for it.
Yeah, and I love it. I love it. Ever since we got Daniel Gafford, I've been seeing the type of production that he gives us. The fact that him and Derek Lively, 1A, 1B, two sides of the same coin. It's like a blessing. It's like something that you've been praying for years, and God finally answered it. Here you go. I got you, Daniel Gafford. There you go. And that's gonna be awesome. But to shift our focus to the playoffs, I've noticed that everybody's pretty much ready to go. Like you said earlier, Derek Lively is in the gym with Daniel Gafford, with Tyson Chandler, even Markieff Morris, just getting ready and preparing for a first round match against the Clippers. But I saw that Tim Hardaway Jr. is dealing with the illness, and did he miss the plane because of that illness? I'm pretty sure that the team did just leave him. But I know that there's bad weather here in Dallas. But like, do you know anything about that?
Yeah, he actually yesterday, Jason Kidd said that he was going to join the team in LA,
Mm,
and that he basically didn't practice yesterday because of the illness. And the way the logistics work, usually the team will practice and then they'll travel as a team from there. So like if you're not there, that's kind of it gets a little complicated. So naturally, it was like, all right, he'll join us on the off day in LA. And like me, I had a lot of flight delays as well too, and he must have left a little later than me and had it even worse,
yeah.
and just wasn't able to get to LA in time to make it to the practice. So they listed him as questionable on the report with that illness, but yeah, he's gonna be joining the team if he hasn't already before the game one for sure.
Okay, and we know how hot and cold up and down Tim Hardaway Jr.'s shooting can be, but I firmly believe that in the role that he's accepted, because before Tim Hardaway was like our second or third best scorer, like he was just shooting the lights out, high volume shooter. We kind of saw it change in that this season, especially after the trade deadline, where his shooting kind of fell off. But however, I noticed towards the end of the season he was doing some of the small things, that the extra passes, getting rebounds, not shooting the ball right away, and finding an open man. How much do you think that could actually help us in the playoffs, or do you think that we do need Tim shooting about 9 threes a game?
I do think it's a little bit of a middle ground. I think depending on how the Clippers are going to play the Mavs, if they're going to try to stay home on role players, as what it actually kind of sounds like based off comments, and I mean the comments from coaches before playoffs about any sort of strategy you could maybe throw them in the shredder or the garbage
Yeah,
can like most of the time. But they are confident in their drop coverage with Zubac, and they sound like Tyronn Lue actually said if we let Lucas score 40 points, but we hold him to like 5 assists, then maybe that's where we want to be, as opposed to obviously letting him drop that 40 and or 30. He didn't say this, but the other outcome would be like dropping like 30-ish points and having like double digit assists, and everyone's feeling a rhythm offensively.
yeah,
And so if that's truly the approach that they would take, then your spot up guys will have to be more aggressive with the trigger from three, to let that fly, because sometimes those looks aren't going to be as clean. And also, depending on how the Clippers ball screen coverages are going to look, you might need Tim to be like the back screener in like stack pick and roll, Spain pick and roll, whatever you like to call it, as well as like the double drag actions. He's going to have to be aggressive when that look is there. But you're right, in the flow of the possessions, he's been increasingly unselfish since that All Star break period, where he's made the extra pass. And I think he's been a little more careful with the ball too. Whenever he's actually been the focus of actions, getting to the middle of the floor. Something that like kind of one of those like random little things that I kind of noticed during the season is like sometimes he'd have turnover problems when he got to the nail area. And I think he's been a little more careful with that. Avoiding those turnovers, creating the right outcome for the team, whether it's those double wide pin downs or he's running an actual ball screen. But in the playoffs, you don't really run ball screens for like
nah,
Tim Hardaway,
nah,
really. So that's one of those like game 68 or whatever sequences that you probably see. But yeah, overall, I think there will be a balance, definitely depending on how the Clippers are gonna play that approach defensively. But regardless, he is someone that's wired. If he has a shot he likes, he's gonna take it, and that does have value in and of itself, even if it is frustrating. As a fan, when those shots aren't falling, I'm sure he's even more frustrated than
yeah,
the fan, obviously.
yeah,
So yeah, definitely has value in like keeping that number, like that volume, as you said, like whether it's nine or a lower number, having that aggression. There's a fine line for it, and I think that will be one of the things I'm interested to see in the series, even with all the other players as well too. Like, some of the wing players like PJ Washington, who hasn't shot it great this season. He's been shooting better as of late, but Derrick Jones is typically labeled that like weak shooter, if you will, like where the defense is going to sag off. How aggressive those guys are, even if shots fall, with the catch and shoot looks, will definitely be interesting, because there's a process that you may want to uphold to then kind of get through that downturn, and then shots may fall if you trust it, and then the defense has to rethink some of their approaches. So that's why the playoffs are so interesting all the time, because the chess match, living with the
yep.
process, and when results do and don't happen, how do you react? So yeah, that's definitely going to be interesting to see in of itself.
For sure, for sure. I think the last time we played the Clippers in the playoffs, Tim was our third leading scorer, even with Kristaps Porzingis. And even though he may not still be that same Tim Hardaway Jr., I think that I still firmly believe that there is a version of Tim that will just have benefits for us. Whether or not he rises to the occasion in the playoffs and he does shoot crazy, or he makes those extra passes, he finds out where to be on defense, so the ball, whoever has the ball, doesn't blow right past him. Right. I think Tim Hardaway still has a lot of value, even though a lot of people are up and down on him. And I've been high, I've been low, but I know who Tim Hardaway is. I know that when it comes down to it, I can always rely on Tim to do just the small things to help this team out. And even though he is questionable for game one, there is a player whose name's been floating around, and I feel like I'm not too sure, but Kawhi Leonard. What do you think, or what do you know about Kawhi Leonard's availability for game one?
Yeah, I think overall what we do know is that, he's going to be listed as questionable. I think that's supposed to drop like while we're recording, like in 15-ish minutes.
Yeah.
People have already kind of reported their inklings of it being, labeled questionable for that report. And that's what Tyronn Lue's actually communicated in the last couple of days, is that we're going to list him as questionable. Sometimes, again, with the little schemes that people like to play before the playoffs, and a team that got fined 25 grand for injury reporting,
Yep.
you're not always going to take them at their word, but that is what it looks like ended up happening, with that final report before the game. But, the main things, it can go either way when someone's questionable. But when you read between the lines, like actions speak louder than words. And Kawhi has not participated in any contact portions of practice leading into the playoffs. Missed 8 straight games. I don't know about you, but like that seems very like challenging to envision playing against a high stakes game where you're going to have to, switch and guard Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, take a
Yeah.
lot of contact. So I think if I had to guess, I would lean more on the not going to play game one. Now that becomes a matter, as Paul George said, today at the Clippers, practice media availability. He expects them to join them soon. Like I'm butchering his exact quote, but along those like those same lines, that doesn't really give a lot of confidence. It's not like he will like at some point. I'm sure he'll be with us. Like that's yeah,
Mm,
definitely more of like a miss game one,
yeah.
maybe play game two, maybe play game three sort of vibe there a little bit. But that's why we're people go and cover things and check all the day to day. So we'll definitely have to keep tabs whether he misses game one or not, and see how it's kind of progressing before that game too. Because it's a relatively quick turnaround. It's one day off, and I mean I don't know what the practice schedule is going to be looking like, but there's not really a expansive opportunity to be practicing if you're the Clippers or the Mavs.
Yeah.
So not too much may change, but again, people definitely look past certain like levels of that return to competition process or expedite it when it is the playoffs. So definitely another thing to keep an eye on, obviously for sure.
For sure. And with Kawhi Leonard's history of just his injuries in the playoffs, he is a playoff riser. He is a two-time final MVP, won championships with the San Antonio Spurs, the Toronto Raptors. So we know what to expect from Kawhi Leonard. However, we also know that he does not play around when it comes to his injuries. He had that thigh bruise in San Antonio. I want to say he had ACL surgery on his right knee. I think it's the same knee that has inflammation. He had surgery a few years
Yeah,
back.
it is the same one. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Kawhi Leonard does not play. He will not. I don't think Kawhi would risk injury. I think that this is 100% his decision. Obviously, the team will also weigh in what they think, but if Kawhi isn't 100%, he's not going to risk missing the entire playoffs off of just one game. So I believe he's going to miss game one, game two. We'll see. But regardless if he's there or not, the Dallas Mavericks will have to step up. We're going to have to treat every game like it's a game seven. If we don't win the first game away, I'm under the impression that's okay. The first two games are really just like a chess match. You're just feeling out the other team. How well did they prepare? How well did you prepare? And what adjustments can you make live in the game or in the middle of the games as you prepare for games 2, 3, and 4? But as you've been in the gym, as you've been around these players, how well prepared do you think we are for this first round matchup, whether or not Kawhi plays or not?
Yeah, I think in general, it seems like there's a quality preparation element to it. I think overall, it's definitely interesting because these teams haven't played each other since like December.
Yeah,
But I mean, the Mavericks are more of a changed team than the Clippers because they had James Harden, for those matchups. Shortly after that trade, that first game where the Mavericks blew out the Clippers at the AAC, was the start of that 3 game series. Then they lost the next two. But it's a little different when you're preparing for someone like Daniel Gafford or Derrick Lively at the five at all times, or most of the time, I should say, because Maxi Kleba could be one of those change up
yeah,
options at the five to be that small ball like stretch switch option. But that's very different compared to dealing with Grant Williams at the five. Like that's a completely different lineup configuration. With PJ Washington as another option to play in that small ball group. The Clippers haven't seen that either. The Mavericks have more perimeter size to be able to handle those perimeter options that the Clippers have when they are healthy. But that's definitely where it's going to get interesting. I think there's only so much preparation you can do when you're playing one of the better teams in the NBA. Because if the Clippers at some point are healthy, there's times where you're going to have to account for 3 dynamic players like James Harden, Paul George, and Kawhi all at the same time. And if you have your 2 superstars on the court, that's kind of a simple math equation at that point where
yeah,
it's like, all right, so Derrick Jones and PJ Washington, or sub out one of those guys or swap out one of those guys in any given lineup. That's only two to handle 3 high level perimeter players. So you're probably going to have to ask Kyrie or Luka to handle, like maybe James Harden or someone that you may not want to ideally have them handle. And that's what makes having so much talent on one team such a challenge. But on the other end, the Clippers are also in a situation, obviously where they're going to have to handle the Mavericks talent as well too. And having the physicality inside the paint and the size, that's definitely a benefit now that the Mavericks have that they didn't have, where they can kind of wear out their opponent more, throughout a physical playoff series, where the officials, since the All-Star break, haven't really been calling as many fouls, letting teams play through contact. So as we mentioned, that's actually a point that we should have brought up. I feel like I forgot that one. That makes you a more, I guess you could say, better equipped team to handle that style,
Yeah,
where the officiating crews are allowing you to play through that contact when you are having that ability to play in the paint at a high level. So definitely think they are prepared for it. A lot goes into that preparation process. But then again, it's always how you adjust when you get the proverbially punched in the mouth in the playoffs. How do you
yeah,
react to it? What are you willing to go to? And at least that's why Maxi Kleba, I think, still factors in well. And, Dante Exum, those kind of X factors where you can really change the style of your lineup. With a guy like Exum, you can still have a ball handler out there to run the offense, get into the paint, but you also have another perimeter defender with length who has guarded someone like James Harden in the playoffs. So if you're kind of playing that chess match and simulating a couple rounds, if you will, of that chess match, maybe at some points you do choose to go small and you can have Maxi Kleba at the 5, trust him to switch. And maybe you could have guys like Exum, Washington, and Kleba. And that's 3 perimeter defenders that you can trust to, make those switches and handle those matchups against some of those guys that the Clippers have all at a given time. So that's definitely why, overall, I think they are going to be well equipped for this series. They have the ability to play small, play big, and do it at an effective level with the health being on their side at this time of year, which, for the Clippers, dealing with the superstar injury is definitely, not the case for them.
right. And this team is going to be amazing. This Dallas Mavericks team is ready. I've been saying it for the past like week and a half. Mavs in 3. We don't need a game 4. We're ready now. Yeah, Mavs in 3. And like you said, I mean, having that superstar talent that the Clippers have, where they have a James Harden, they have a Paul George, they have a Kawhi Leonard, and a Russell Westbrook off the bench, where he may not be the same OKC Russ, but you don't want to just let him turn into OKC Russ on any given night. That is something that we are going to have to really put a point of emphasis on defense. However, with the way this Mavericks team is just constructed, we have great defenders. We've had one of the best defenses in the league. And I want to say our starting 5 was actually the best starting 5 defensively across the board. People like PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, of course, but also Derrick Jones Jr., who's a great perimeter defender. So is Dante Exum. I think we've got guys that are willing to do all the nitty gritty, dirty work on defense so Luka and Kyrie can lead the offense, which will also in turn help them on the offensive end. Their defense will lead to better offenses. And our fast break, man, look, when Daniel Gafford gets going on the fast break, it blows my mind sometimes how fast he gets down because you're my center. He's not 7 foot, he's about 6'10", but you're my center. You're booking it down there. When Derrick Jones Jr. gets going, it's going to be a thing of beauty, and I am looking forward to it. But to shift a little bit away from the playoffs, because tomorrow's going to be electric. It's going to be exciting, and I am stoked for it. I've been seeing reports. Not too sure if you've seen them, but apparently the Mavericks are one of the betting odds favorites to land either Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, or even Trae Young. Is there anything that you've seen? Because I don't think the money would work. I don't think that we would really have the right players to trade that we don't want to trade. But do you see any validity to where maybe Klay Thompson does come to Dallas on a very team friendly contract that we can afford? Or is this just smoke and mirrors to put pressure on the teams to try to pay those players to come back?
I think honestly, the logistics that you would have to take, I'd have to take a deeper, dive into the financial situations. But for the Warriors, I think sending those guys out and signing trades would be very challenging if I understand it correctly. So that makes it a very complex, sort of problem to have. That you're solving for. Front offices have the ability to, circumvent some of that stuff and get creative. But I do think I mean, Clay Thompson, I know he finished the season, very rough in that last game. Rough
Yeah.
is probably an understatement. As
Oh of
very
10.
understatement.
0 of 10. Man.
As bad of a shooting night as that one gets. But I think it's definitely interesting. There's for a team that had a core that won all those titles, it's very interesting to think about the non-Steph elements of them now,
Yeah.
because Draymond Green getting suspensions like that 20-ish, 25 game, whatever it was, game suspension. and having those topics arise where sometimes you're in the second quarter, he's getting thrown out of a game, and you're like, oh, I guess the anchor of our defense is gone for the rest of
Yeah,
this game.
yeah,
Like, and then Klay Thompson, the inconsistency, with after his injuries that he's dealt with, and the decline in his defensive impact. I do think in a vacuum, those players, could be beneficial. But I do think the logistics to acquire them would be challenging. And I think the team, if you look at them now compared to maybe at the start of the season, is in a different spot. I think you can trust PJ Washington and their center rotation to kind of anchor that front court more than you would, the previous, version of this roster, obviously, as
yeah,
well. So that's where that previous, I think, like that desire or potential, like, draw of Draymond Green could have been like maybe a year ago, where the team struggled like significantly defensively, and you're like, oh, maybe a third piece, with Luka and Kyrie, this could be the maybe the option to take a gamble on. And I think as for Klay, it depends also as well on the market, because I think we've seen some teams linked to him in rumors, like the Orlando Magic with money to spend, and with how few points they had today in that game one, they might be motivated to find whatever potential spark, veteran wise, with that playoff championship pedigree that they can find. So
yep,
if another suitor is motivated to outspend and they don't even need the sign and trade, that's probably the cleanest, for any player, but especially for Klay Thompson, since the Warriors situation is so tough. And honestly, I don't know about if there's really much to say about the Trae Young one, because it's like that's like a small guard, and then
yeah,
I think it's interesting because I think some of these like losing teams in a sense that need that spark plug or that key offensive piece, they probably would be more of a obvious landing spot for a guy like Trae Young. Maybe they're a destination that otherwise couldn't attract players that are as dynamic offensively as him, that are thinking, yeah, that might be the move for us. I don't think that's the Mavs. If you didn't have Kyrie Irving, like that could have been maybe if you squint hard enough. But
yeah.
like
If you squint hard enough, turn your head to the side. Yeah, yeah, maybe. Yeah,
for sure. But like overall, like yeah, I think there's for the Warriors players, there's more to it than that. But obviously with the fit, since you already have a superstar backcourt, but definitely we'll have to think about those mechanics of how you get that sign and trade done, what money they're willing to or Clay's willing to take, since he's the free agent this summer, and he would have to probably be willing to take like a taxpayer mid level, if I'm understanding it, which is very low in comparison, I'm
yeah,
sure, to what he would want from
yeah,
teams that have
yep,
money to spend. So yeah, I think he'd be more likely to get a better contract from the Warriors to stay than he would to take some low tax mid level exception contract from someone else. So I think definitely how the playoffs shake out, though, tends to really adjust how teams look at their roster. You might look at, you know, that stuff a little differently if you have a disappointing first round. And also the Mavericks, just from like a 30,000-foot view perspective, they'll have to think about, how they're going to retain Derrick Jones.
yep,
And if you are unable to, and you get that like intel, like, hey, he's probably going to take money elsewhere, then that really changes how you would probably approach the offseason as well too. And you'd have to be more willing to take a risk to acquire wing talent, or trust a guy like Josh Green to step in for a larger role. However they view all that stuff, definitely is something to keep an eye on throughout the whole offseason for sure, whether they play well in the playoffs or not. Because if they do play well in the playoffs, that might even be easier for Derrick Jones to get that contract
yeah.
after taking a proven deal.
Yeah, Derrick Jones Jr. is a player. I think I want to say he's our only free agent that we really have to worry about. And me personally, I mean, he's on like a 1 year, like $3 million contract, very team friendly. I'm willing to throw the remaining free, well, I'm sorry, the remaining money we have at him at free agency. I think Derrick Jones Jr. has been a godsend for us, a great perimeter defender. He's really good at guarding those quick and pesky guards. I've seen him guard Steph Curry, doing a great job on him. I think he actually blocked one of his threes. It was phenomenal. And so obviously with how this team's constructed, like you said, if we do have a great postseason, Derrick Jones Jr. may get some offers from other teams, and I would only hope that we would gladly match whatever that we possibly can match. Because just having a team that's cohesive and together and that build that chemistry, especially over the course of just not one season, but multiple seasons, will help keep that window open for us to stay competitive, to keep striving for a championship, keep making runs in the playoffs. And Derrick Jones Jr. has been just phenomenal all season. I was kind of torn whether or not if I liked him more off the bench or as a starter. Because off the bench, he was torching their second units. But as a starter, especially towards the end of the season when Josh Green went down with injury, he stepped up in a big way. And he may not have the prettiest shot. He doesn't, always score the most points. However, those threes come in handy, and he's definitely increased his 3-point shot as well over the last few seasons. I think he's shooting the best he's ever been from three. And if that doesn't prove that Luka Doncic makes his teammates better, I don't know what else to say. But with Draymond Green and Klay Thompson, Trae Young, with all these names floating around and possibly coming to Dallas, if we need to, out of those three, I would say try to get Klay. I mean, he's coming off of a 5-year, $190 million contract. That and then going for the tax mid-level exception, that's a big drop. That's a big drop off. And teams like Orlando, they could definitely throw him the bag, throw him some way more than what we can. And if he wants to just chase a check, then go right ahead. If you want to win championships, I mean, hey, Kyrie's having fun. Join in on it. That's my pitch to you, Klay Thompson. If you want to have fun, come to Dallas. But I think this team is fine as is. Obviously, you can make adjustments where you can. Who knows what happens between now and June when the offseason comes and you start hearing those rumblings. I know DeMar DeRozan, that's another player over there in Chicago, another failed season with the Bulls. He's not getting any younger. He may want to look elsewhere, but we got a lot of time left to really talk about the offseason. But one last thing about the offseason, is there a player that you think or that you know that this Dallas Mavericks team definitely wants to keep long term that fans may not be happy with? I know Tim Hardaway's a name that a lot of fans toss around that they want gone, same as Dwight Powell and Maxi Kleber. I think those three are the three main names I hear. Sometimes I hear Jaden Hardy's name tossed around in fan GM trade rumors, right? But is there a player that you've seen or heard that, or you think that the Mavs definitely want to keep long term that fans may not even think of?
Well, I think it's tough. I think probably Maxi Kleba is probably the one I would pick out of that list in general because like the team has shown that they are more than happy to close games with him if they need that spacing, if they need that rim protection. And even though he's had quite a bit of those injury stretches the last couple of years, he's factored in once again as an important part of their team. So I think that's probably the main one. I think we've seen in the last couple of years Tim Hardaway Jr. being put in those trade rumors where, he actually media day, he said, I actually thought I might not be here. So
Yup.
like,
Yup.
that's naturally something as you build your team out and, he's not starting, he's making a good amount of money and the deal's closer to expiring, that becomes a more tradable, more enticing contract for other teams to take on. So I think that would probably be someone like just naturally in general to keep an eye on whether, regardless of what the target would be, that's probably one of their most favorable salary matching mechanisms for a potential trade. And then, I guess there's other players that are interesting, like, Jaden Hardy and Josh Green. They weren't included in trade talks, for Clint Capella
That's right.
this
Yeah.
during the summer. So the team, is clearly, high on those guys. And Josh Green is going to be starting his new contract during this upcoming season as well. So I think it's probably early to necessarily be trade machine like let's
Yeah.
get off of the guy for either of them. But
Right.
like the organization, the actions speak louder than words, and they value those guys and their development. And they poured a lot into Josh Green as an organization. They're pouring quite a bit into Jaden Hardy as well. And I think even when talking about player development standpoint, Jason Kidd mentioned Hardy along with Olivier-Maxence Prosper about being someone that could factor in into the equation more for minutes if roster changes happen, especially. It could happen regardless if they just earn it. But
Yeah.
if someone like a Tim Hardaway Jr. does get moved in a hypothetical scenario, you can trust Max Prosper to fill in and play a larger role as he gets more comfortable with the NBA level and works on his game more and more. And that's where like maybe like the NBA Summer League, not sure if he's going to participate, but usually we've seen last couple years a lot of these sophomore guys have decided I want like even the top picks, like not the top picks. I'm not saying Victor Wembanyama is going to go out there and Vegas. He sounds like he hates that city, so
Yeah.
I don't expect that. But like Benedict Mathurin
Yeah.
with the Pacers was participating for a little bit with his summer league team. So seeing his progression like in the middle of the the summer, a little after that free agency period starts, could maybe give them more confidence in how their roster, mechanics are looking, how they've like the configuration of what they've built. Oh, like we want to trust Omax.
Mhm.
Now he's showing it, and we feel more confident in it. Awesome. And if Tim Hardaway is still on your team at that point, maybe you feel more willing, like, oh, okay, we could maybe look into making this move because now's the time to, lean more into Omax's immediate opportunities. But then again, a lot of teams, value just the 30,000-foot view a little more than like getting hyped off summer league, because I
Yeah.
know a lot of fans can get hyped off that, and the GM doesn't necessarily see it that way. So maybe taking that into training camp, and then there's value in keeping a contract on your books as well too, the closer it gets to expiring, because then it's a lot less about who that player actually is versus just the flexibility to move that money as well too. So there's like a lot of layers that kind of go into those roster mechanics where you're like, okay, so the theory of maybe an upgrade could be logical at this spot or that spot, but maybe longer if we're patient, that money would be better used in a salary matching move that could happen later in, the span of our overall team building plan. So definitely a lot of just random things to think about with that the NBA 2K my league mode
Yep.
sort of perspective for sure.
For sure. But man, we got to give props to Nico Harrison because I feels like since he joined the organization from day one, he has been constantly trying to improve the roster. Now, some of the players that he's traded for aren't here anymore. Davis Bertans, Christian Woods, Vail McGee, and a few others. But it never stopped him from trying to improve and year over year. We drafted Derrick Lively and Omax. Derrick Lively has been a godsend. Omax is the future, which I believe. We traded for PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford. Like Nico Harrison should go get a scratch off. And I feel like the man can't miss. And being able to have young players like Derrick Lively, who I think is going to be a cornerstone for this team long term, I don't see him going anywhere. He better not. And seeing players like Jane Hardy and Josh Green, who their development may not be as fast as much as fans want it to be, but when you're on a team that's trying to win now, the development kind of takes a back seat, and we got to rack up those wins. That takes priority, obviously. But with Omax, I have been to a few of those Texas Legends games, and I don't know about you, but I am impressed with what I've seen. I thought in the beginning of the year, I thought he was just a player that we're going to stash in the G League and you're just going to live in purgatory. But I've seen his improvement. I've seen his game. He could be ready next season. I believe that he could be ready next season to crack the rotation, maybe deep bench, not garbage time, but maybe replacing Maxi as a stretch four. He's about 6'8", only 2 inches shorter than Maxi, but he's I think he shot like 40% from three in the G League. Is there anything that you see from Omax's game that even next year, starting next year, that could help this team moving forward?
Yeah, I think a lot of the general boxes that you like in a role player wing, he checks a lot of them. He's continued to improve his shot, as you mentioned. He's been confident, aggressive, letting it fly, has been efficient, with the legends. And, seeing that, with more opportunities translate with the Mavs would be, that would be that next step. But, within your opportunities you have, you can only control what you can control. And he's checked those boxes. And so, defensively as well, this is where I think, something's really intriguing about him is like, there's not often you go to a facility and it's like after the practice and you see a guy doing like cone workouts where he's like doing like agility work, like really, focused on, improving his defensive, ability. Like that's like middle of the year. I saw that a couple times. So
Oh
like,
wow.
they're really intent on developing him defensively, really maximizing that 6'8" frame, his wingspan. He's got the great tools that you would want in that, disruptive wing defender. And, as well, he's got a great frame. Like he's
Hmm.
physically, it's not someone who's like going to struggle to put on weight and you're hoping at some point it's like, oh, this really thin wing can't really put on weight. Maybe we can't throw him on this guy or that guy. But no, he's got the ideal physical intangibles that you would want. And that alone is a big part of the battle for being a successful player, in the NBA. And, I think there's some little things that I think would get enhanced with his shooting continuing to translate. Like he's always shown that ability to attack downhill off the catch and play off of 2 feet. He loves that shot fake, get the
Yeah.
defense in the air.
Hmm.
That's more lethal when they're running you off the line. They're more aggressive, handling you on that closeout. And they've been actually emphasizing as well him running a little more of those pick and roll actions. We were able to see him in the last two games of the season take on more on his plate And that Thunder game, they felt, like Jason Kidd mentioned, maybe he kind of ran out of gas a little bit. That's a lot of minutes to be playing
Yeah.
overall that he's played in the last little while. Uh, leading up to that point. But seeing him get those reps, that was intriguing thing. He started off very hot, 11 points in that first quarter, and showed that willingness to take catch and shoot shots that you need him to take if you're playing next to someone like Luka. And early in the year, I forgot what exact game it was, but it was a very like late quarter situation, like final possession, where Luka got him the ball and he hesitated, and it was like he didn't get a shot off, and the quarter ended, and Luka was just looking at my hand on the screen. He was like, like shoot the ball, like get
Shoot
it
it.
up, like
Shoot it.
yeah. So like seeing that more aggressive approach on those catch and shoot opportunities, because if you don't take those looks that you're supposed to take, you are going to hear about it
Oh yeah.
from people that have that high standard like Luka Doncic. They expect a process to be what it's supposed to be, and that's a lot of value into that. So getting comfortable with those expectations, growing into the skill set, I think naturally happens with time, and I'm very intrigued to see how it all looks for him during the summer because yeah, he's shown quite a bit of stuff with the legends, and that's definitely the first step in that overall process for sure.
For sure. And Omax, he's gonna. I mean, the confidence to shoot, like you said, like get those shots up. Just if I pass the ball, shoot it. And we saw against the Thunder, and even the Pistons, like he has that confidence. And against the and like what you said about his frame, how it's not gonna be hard for him to put on muscle. I think he's gonna be a very strong player because against the Pistons, he dunked on James Wiseman, had me jumping out my seat like I dunked on James Wiseman. Like it's something about Omax that's just so electrifying. And when you watch him play, like you can see this guy's going to be great for us down the stretch. We may not have a lot of first round picks. We may not, in the next 4 or 5 years get a great first round pick. But we have a lot of young players now, like a Jaden Hardy, a Josh Green, and now a Omax, that if they just keep developing the right way, they're going to be great for us. They're going to be better than a first round pick for a player we don't even know how they would pan out. But what I think is very interesting too is like how Kyrie Irving has attached himself to be Omax's like mentor. And I'm not sure if you see that whenever they're practicing or if you heard anything about that. All I know is that Kyrie and Omax, they're locked in.
Oh yeah, I think something you're always going to get with Kyrie Irving, regardless of who the young players are, what team he's on. He takes a lot of pride in being a mentor for young players. That's something that I heard quite a bit about, even from people who are part of like the Nets organization. Like he took players under his wing, especially like Cam Thomas. That one's well documented, but just no matter, it's not even just like, oh, I like this one young player more and he's important to our organization, I'm gonna help him out a little bit. Like, no, he actually takes pride in like passing down the knowledge to like that next generation. And, that's something that's very, interesting to see overall because it doesn't matter if you're Jaden Hardy. It doesn't matter if you're Luka Doncic. Like, he's
Yep.
going to share wisdom. And that goes a long way when, someone who, has seen a lot of things in their basketball career, been in a lot of high stakes moments, and has done things at a very high level, is willing to give that information out. Because some guys in the NBA, it's like, I don't want to help someone take my spot. I'm good. Well,
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah,
Kyrie Irving doesn't have to worry about that. But like,
exactly.
in general, there's sometimes a difference in mentality with certain players, with approaching those things, because technically yes, it's not part of their job. That's like the quarterback situation when they're like, I'm not
Yeah,
helping develop my replacement.
yep,
But in general, it's like definitely a big thing that you get from Kyrie Irving is that mentorship, very like hands-on approach. You can't mentor someone when they're with the Texas Legends and you're in, Portland and he's
exactly.
not. But in general, that's something that he mentioned. When I think when the team was in Toronto, there was a reporter because with him being Canadian, he's got
Mhm.
those ties. Some of the storylines up there, they were highlighting his development, and during that story, he mentioned that Kyrie's been a helpful element to his process of developing with the Mavs. So definitely something that's a real part of his team. And Jaden Hardy, even last year, I remember I talked to him like very late in the year. I think it was when it was in Miami, that road game during that really like train wreck of a like slide
Yeah.
post All
Oh,
Star break.
yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
he mentioned how helpful Kyrie has been as well. And I didn't ask him. I didn't say, hey, Jaden, how helpful is Kyrie? I just said like, what what's been most helpful in your development throughout your year? And he organically brought up Kyrie as well, which is always a better thing when you're talking to someone. You don't want to force that name to be
Yeah.
name dropped, so that definitely was a good indicator of like the influences and the influence that Kyrie has been able to provide, as a mentor.
And that's great because obviously when we traded for Kyrie, what they graded that a D trade. Oh, it's a bad contract. He's a locker room cancer. He's going to run Luka out. We heard all of what the media had to say about Kyrie, but we still took the chance anyway. And honestly, that was probably the highlight of this Dallas Mavericks during. I mean, obviously drafting Luka was wonderful, but in the Luka Doncic era, like the biggest play to just help this team was obviously taking the chance. We traded away Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith, who I love Dorian Finney-Smith, I still do. But we got Kyrie Irving. It was kind of a risk, but knowing that he's bought into these young guys like Jaden Hardy and Omax, knowing that he actually cares about the Dallas community and the organization, and in turn, the organization cares about him. During Ramadan, they were flying out a personal chef for Kyrie, making sure he has his vegan meals, not just a banana on the bench. Here you go, enjoy. Like making sure he's taken care of, and in turn, he's taking care of the young guys. Does that make you feel like Kyrie may just retire as a Maverick?
Yeah, I could see that depending on how long he wants to play and all that stuff. I think things are trending positively for them to continue to be a long term arrangement. I'm definitely curious to see how the overall like contract situation looks because I believe he has an option for the final year if I
Mhm.
remember
Yeah.
correctly. So I think seeing like usually players don't take that option because it's financially more lucrative to not. So seeing like kind of how the team thinks, paying him like what they want to pay him at that age, since he's already 32 now, I
Yeah.
believe. I think he had his 32nd birthday late in the season. So definitely, I think from a relationship standpoint. It's a lot of positivity. Things are, especially with the basketball element of it. Especially that goes a long way. When you are winning, it's very easy to be positive.
Yeah.
And the things that go beyond basketball, like as you mentioned, they've contributed. Both sides have contributed as well too. So I think when you actions, like I love to say that a lot, actions speak louder than words. But so
Yeah.
like a lot of that trends in a way where you put it together, and yeah, you would think that that would be a long term arrangement for sure.
And I hope so. Whether he retires as Mavs, maybe he becomes our head coach one day. I think the knowledge, I think that's the one thing, because obviously Kyrie is an amazing finisher. He's an amazing shooter. He's an amazing leader. Like on the court, he is great. But the one thing I don't think it's talked about enough, or maybe it does, but I feel like it needs to be talked about more, is his knowledge and wisdom in the game of basketball. When we were playing against the Golden State Warriors, he was locked in with PJ saying, one more stop. One more stop. Yeah, we thought we won and we were done, but Kyrie's like, nope, one more stop. Like the way that he is just so locked in, the way that he rallies the team, whether it's a game-winning shot from Dante Exum or maybe the hook shot over Nikola Jokic, he gets the team involved because it's not just about him. And it bothers me so much how in Brooklyn there was so much drama around Kyrie when in reality he was just being himself. And I don't think Kyrie has done anything different while being in Dallas than just being himself. And it kind of shows you just how much his organization values Kyrie Irving and how much we're willing to just trust him. And there were reports, I want to say, earlier in the year how he kind of helped facilitate the Grant Williams trade. He was talking to Grant. He saw how he wanted a bigger role. And when he spoke to Nico about that, Nico listened. They made it happen. Now, it didn't work out long term, but it's good to know that the players listen to Kyrie, the front office listens to Kyrie, the ownership listens to Kyrie, because Kyrie did get $1 million raise for getting 50 wins. So Mark Cuban better open up that paycheck, buddy. But however, it's good to know that Kyrie is enjoying his time here. At least that's what it seems like, and that he and the team are just all locked in. There's nothing but high praise I see, and it's really good. And one of the last things that I want to talk about is Luka Doncic. Obviously, the man, the myth, the legend, Luka Magic. He does crazy things. This season has been arguably his best season of his entire career. But as someone who is technically part of the media, maybe you can shed some light on why the media continues to push the goalposts, continue to show love to players that may not even be in the same realm as Luka Doncic. And I've got a weird working theory that maybe it's because what we've seen from Luka Doncic from his rookie year till now, we've been kind of desensitized to it. Those weird, crazy trick shots, those falling fadeaway threes that what he does on a daily basis isn't special anymore coming from him because we've seen it a million times. But what do you think is the real reason why Luka Doncic continues to get overlooked for MVP?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is there's a lot of I would guess that the voters, a lot of them are very wired to look at that record overall, like the standing placement. But like something that I would argue for this year is like the East is so horrible. Like the Mavs would be
Yeah.
second in the East. So like, it's like a little like that type of stuff. I don't think it's factored in as much where
Yeah.
it's like, you kind of dig beyond the surface and you're like, oh wait, I believe they finished with the sixth best league record.
Hmm.
Like if you break that up into two conferences, that would, I mean, I know that's not how it actually works, but like if you break it up, that's still a top three, splitting the bracket in half or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
That's still a very successful regular season finish. And that's, with a guy who is playing on a team that made a lot of changes mid-season and like as we said, like they just shifted the team identity in a sense on the fly, and he is getting elite results out of it. And they never looked back. They went like 16-2 during an
Yep.
18 game stretch. So that was extremely impressive. But I think back to the original point about like the voters and stuff. I think some voters like in general, like not naming any names like to throw people under the bus, but I do think some people get a little tired of the officiating complaints. That's something that I heard like during the FIBA World Cup, even outside of the NBA, where people are kind of like, oh, does he always do that in Dallas? Like some people actually asked me that when I was
Yeah.
at the World Cup. They're like, does he always do that? Like I personally am not like. I like to focus on X's and O's, so I'm not really like fixated on the whole like, oh, like the narrative elements of like, oh, referee this, referee that, like that sort of thing. But I think, as writers, like the traditional writers, they are focused on narratives and the emotion and all that stuff. So I think for in a case by case basis, a few may be thinking that, but I feel me personally, he's been a lot better with officiating.
Yeah.
For quite a good while. Like there was a stretch where I think when Kyrie was out, that he kind of had a frequent little run of getting technicals,
Mhm.
like with officials. But then I think since like the All Star break, that's declined. Like some of them have been rescinded
Yeah.
as
I
well
think two did.
too.
I
And
think two did. Yeah.
yeah, two did. Yeah, and some of those were just kind of like I think at least the most recent one was a little weird. Like he just
Yeah.
like yeah, like it was like a little sensitive with the officiating whistle for sure. So
Yeah,
like
man.
so now I think that might be part of it. I think other parts of it too are like you also have to think, I guess, about it as well as like some of these other talents are very like captivating as well too. Like I think we're in the era of being captivated by Nikola Jokic for a lot of these voters as well too. Like he also is like going to put up crazy stats as well too. But I guess if you think about it as well too, like they kind of gave him grace on the standings positioning in his some of his MVP seasons because of the narrative of the injuries. So it's like kind of a weird thing where you're like, oh well, Luka has Kyrie, but didn't you say Kyrie was gonna like make the team fall apart and drive Luka out of the out of Dallas or
I'm
something?
just
And then
saying.
like it's just kind of a weird situation sometimes. But at the end of the day, some people are gonna have their like carrying over perceptions. Like Nikola Jokic is coming off the title.
Mhm.
So, people are going to be giving him a head start in a sense, if you will, especially after, like, I think there's some of it might be this too. You give another guy the MVP during a year Jokic wins the finals, then you're kind of righting a wrong, like an official. Like that's part
Yeah.
of this overall thing is kind of my thing potentially with that as well too.
Yeah, I saw a few people in the media, talk about, we gave it to Joel Embiid last year, but then he flamed out in the playoffs. And, maybe we should have gave it to Jokic. But to my understanding, this is the regular season MVP. We've got, the Western Conference MVP and the Eastern Conference MVP, as well as the Finals MVP. We got a bunch of MVPs awards to go out for different parts of the season. All Star MVP, so it's very frustrating for a lot of fans because as Mavericks fans, we know Dirk got a lot of criticism from the media as well. He's too soft, he can't lead a team, and so it feels like that's happening all over again with Luca. And maybe that's the price you got to pay for being a superstar in Dallas. That the media will never show you love. But one thing that I've always believed, Grant, is that you can't tell them you got to show them. Go out and win something. Prove them wrong. The argument for Luka Doncic for MVP, other than the numbers, because the numbers are amazing, but Kyrie was hurt for a good stretch of games. Our lineup changed frequently. I think our current lineup of Luca, Kyrie, Derrick Jones Jr., PJ, and Daniel Gafford just crossed over 100 minutes in the last few games of the season. Whereas you look at a team like the Denver Nuggets, their starting five has over 500 minutes played together. Our lineup has constantly changed. And what's happened? We still win games with another 50-win season. There's a lot of arguments for and against it, but I understand that we are in the era of just a lot of great talent in the league. Nikola Jokic, a great talent. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I know Mavs fans would hate me for this, but he is a great talent. He's got a great team with him as well, but he is a great talent. And there's a bunch of other players too, Anthony Edwards, Jason Tatum. But it's tough when it comes to the MVP because unlike the Defensive Player of the Year award, it's not an award that you can quantify. You can't, create a bunch of boxes and like, okay, you got to check these, and then you got to make sure you hit this many points and this many rebounds. It's very fluid. It changes year over year. And I get that. And at the end of the day, a championship, that's something for all of us, not just for Luka. So if he can do that for all of us Mavericks fans, that'll be great, man. But
If you could just do that, that'd be awesome.
hey, I'm ready for a parade, man. I wasn't here in 2011 when they won, but I'm here now. And I'll be at that parade and I'll be going crazy. But that's all I got for you, Grant, man. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're traveling with the team. You're busy reporting on every little thing, and I'll be keeping my eyes peeled on your Twitter for any updates, man. But is there anything that you want to say to the people before we go?
Yeah, I guess for the most part, just continue to keep an eye out for my coverage throughout the playoffs, and then your coverage as well too. With the videos that you'll be putting up. I always enjoy checking this stuff out as well too, and I appreciate when you include my tweet. Like, hey, there's that. I know that guy. That's pretty cool. So yeah, definitely keep up the good work for sure.
I appreciate it, Grant. But everybody watching, thank you for making this far into the video. Make sure you check out our Discord, Twitter, link description below. Consider being a channel member. We're doing a free jersey giveaway. And until next time, well, until tomorrow, where we go live for the first game of the playoffs. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on that. Until next time, peace.